So last night we watched Coco, the Disney Pixar film about ancestors. So what did you all think?
Well, I hadn't seen it. I've been wanting to see it for a while. I of course was curious, how a younger child would engage with that. I mean, it was very dynamic. The animation was amazing, but it's kind of a deep topic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very deep topic.
the grandma was pretty
Yes.
belligerent half the time over everything. She didn't want him to play music. She didn't want this. She didn't want that. Which probably culture-wise was she was the matriarch or whatever you call it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So she called the shots, and the little guy didn't want to play ball.
Down to the sandal. Isn't that a common thing? What's the sandal called in Spanish?
Huarache,
Oh, okay.
the huarache.
Rashes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing
No.
about the story for me was I had seen the movie before, but didn't remember it. And we were at Julie's one time, and the girls were going to watch it. Well, I hadn't seen it, didn't know anything about it, so we sat down and watched it. And towards the end of the movie last night, after 2 hours it was roughly, it dawned on me that I had seen that story before. What in the world?
Well, that's what's good about not having a memory. Everything's brand new again.
That's right, it really was.
Yeah, I'm curious if culturally, I'm sure there were some critics kind of picking that apart, but it seemed like in general, from my having not grown up in that culture, that it kind of made sense. Like the matriarch was running the show. Of course, she was influenced by her early trauma of
Yeah.
being a single mom, losing her. Well, not her, but that story was in the family, and then just like you don't talk back to your parents. You don't talk back to the elders.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yesterday we went to a Day of the Dead event, I guess, where there was a blessing done by some indigenous, I guess, were they like a group of healers, or what would you call them?
Yeah, they definitely seemed like curanderas that were probably in that community, healing community.
Yeah, so I thought the film kind of brought in, I thought tied really well with that experience to see, because they, during the blessing, talked about the same thing about thanking your ancestors, gratitude for the ancestors and their journey and their vision for you, and them being present in your daily life now. So I thought that was a really good tie into the experience that we had yesterday, looking at all the ofrendas and that other people had built for their families.
With the costumes that they were wearing, and the beat of the drum, and all that ceremony, and the kneeling down like they were praying. And it was pretty impressive. I got tired of standing. I thought I was going to collapse a couple of times because my legs got tired. All of a sudden, oh gosh, I started leaning forward.
Well, and the incense
That smoke
makes you, incense always at church would always make me kind of faint.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the message was interesting about, I don't know if that's actually part of like actual how it would work, but that, if the belief is that if you're forgotten,
Oh yeah.
how important it is to be remembered, and that's why you have the photo and have your ofrenda, and or if that was just dramatic for the movie, but I feel like that's what I'm kind of trying to do with the podcast, is so that there is some remembrance that can last about these people, and that their stories can live on over time. So I really loved that part of the movie.
Yeah, that was just, yeah, such a beautiful tradition. I mean, it made me think about the little boy, Miguel, and his role in the family. So, I mean, I totally relate to the story because he grew up with a family story, and he, had to obey what was expected of him, not to be a musical person, and yet he felt like really drawn towards knowing his father and playing music, and then as we know from watching the movie, one thing led to another, and then he discovered, oh, that guy's not even his dad. And so then the whole story came out to the community that everybody had it all wrong, even the wife, that was a skeleton in the someone who had passed. Well, she didn't. Yeah, that was interesting. I love that. How, just that spiritual idea that if you're not remembered, you kind of are in a limbo land.
Right.
Like you won't get accepted, which I don't know. Who knows? We can't prove that, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of fascinating. Makes me think about other people that I've known that have been cut off from their families, or people that have been adopted. And they have no idea. Like if I hadn't found you, I wouldn't know any of this family history. I would just have no idea. And that feels like a limbo land. I mean, especially for me when I was little, people would start speaking Spanish to me, or they asked me where I was from. Are you Lebanese? Are you Italian? Are you Eskimo? I mean, it was like all over the map. And I was like, I have no idea. I didn't know.
Yeah,
I
see,
didn't know what to say.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't really picked up on either. That's a big a common thread in genealogy is that there's these family stories that are very established.
Right.
This is how this happened. This is why it happened. This is who was involved. And then often in genealogy, you discover that actually that's not the story at all. It's totally different.
Right.
Or like we were talking about the other day about family members who we had heard stories about them for years, and then, the actual personal experience that we have with them, actually, they turn out to be totally different, or there's these other reasons for why they had stories they had created or experienced that was the reason they weren't involved with the family anymore, or there were reasons for why they did things that people weren't aware of. And I think that's something that with families you uncover over and over again, because we are story-driven people, and that becomes part of our identity, and it's very hard to let go of those stories.
Yeah, there isn't.
Even if the facts bear something
Yeah,
different.
I think, that's a good point. I think I feel I identify with that little boy, Miguel, because I was bumping up against the system, because I was like, I don't know, this story just doesn't pan out. I mean, that was not necessarily what he was thinking. He was just a little guy, but I think that it's interesting to look at siblings, like what happens with siblings that are adopted out of their, for me, it was just losing you, Dad. But I think because Rick could always pass as white, green eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, he can get
yeah.
pretty dark, but he's, I couldn't pass as white, never. And so that kind of made me, it just supported my idea of I have to find my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For years. I mean, even when I was 19, I took my birth name back. I had to go to court. I had to pay to get my own name back.
At what age?
I was 19.
Wow.
So that was like 5 years before I actually found Dad. So I was already on the path. I mean, I knew, and I thought that I was going to have to hire a detective to find you, but it was so easy to find you. And
Yeah.
I mean, compared to the movie, like all the what that little boy had to go through to get to the real story. I mean, for some people, they're not even able to make the discovery, and I'm sure that shows up in genealogy.
I also wonder, and I haven't really talked about this with people who aren't really into genealogy or family history at all, but because that movie was so popular and widespread, what do those, because I talk to people all the time who don't know anything about their family history or their ancestry, and they're really uninterested. How did he kind of impact culturally for people to sort of think about the impact of their ancestors and learning their stories, learning who they are, or just paying attention to that there's other presence in their lives that they might not be aware of, or maybe they just thought, oh, that's a cute movie, and then moved on with their lives. I don't know.
Cute. Yeah, it's hard to fathom somebody not, I'm sure you feel this way, not being curious about their lineage. And I actually run into this all the time in my work, where I'm sitting with the client and they're telling me, their experience, and I'm like, this is bigger than you. And so I always kind of, depending on the person, I kind of bring up the idea of what's called a legacy burden. Mm-hmm. But say that, in our legacy, we could have a burden, and that could be the source of our symptoms, and we don't even know what happened. But we still have the symptomatology that gets carried through us biologically. But then we can also have the opposite of a burden is the resiliency that comes through our family. I mean, I think about you, Dad, and just think Rick and me, and now Oak and Yarrow, and I think North. They're just super strong, athletic. They can endure a lot, and are very resourceful. I feel like that's a resource from your lineage, and maybe it's from my mom's too. I haven't really studied that side so much, but it's good to kind of keep in mind that it can be the trauma, but it can also be the incredible resource that comes through our lineage. And for Miguel, it was like he was a natural musician.
Yeah.
And really good-natured, like his father. His real father.
When the grandma tore up his guitar and threw it on the floor.
He got pissed.
Yeah. She really beat it to death, didn't she? That's pretty funny. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about this situation in terms of culture is that in Miguel's situation, that little town, it was all basically the same culture. There was hardly any diversity to speak of. Right. And in today's society, there's diversity everywhere. And so that whole idea of trying to trace your lineage and all that is more difficult because of the diversity. Like in our family alone, Michael and his family in Maryland, and we have people in San Diego, we have them in San Francisco area, we have them everywhere. Right. And so how do you take that diversity and pull it together somehow so that you have a better understanding of where you came from and why you see things the way you see them, and why did I go to college and nobody else in our family did it for the longest time, and it took a while for it to catch on, but who knows why.
Yeah, because in the movie, I did note that, they're living, the extended family is living together. The grandmother's there, the great-grandmother's there, which is not something that's something that's missing from most of our families now.
So true. One thing that I feel is really touching, sort of takeaway for me watching that movie, is how, if there's one person in the family that, just sort of questions the family's reality, the stories, what's been called the truth, and then a little bit of exploration is made, and that one person discovers, oh wow, this is, in that movie it was like, this is not my dad, this famous singer, and then how the wife of that, what was it, like his great grandmother who was abandoned,
great grandmother,
over time kind of came around. So there was like what I would call relational repair. And then that's like just sort of trickles down through the generations until like the whole family gets healed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that happens in real time, not just in the movies.
I like too that he got to know his long deceased relatives that he didn't know anything about, but they all knew him.
Yes.
And supported him. And then
Right.
that he felt like he was always a little different, didn't know where that came from. And that then when he met his great grandfather, he realized, oh, this comes from you, even though this is otherwise, it's not, he never would have known him.
Right.
But he's still carrying this legacy of his throughout his everyday without knowing it before he actually had that experience of meeting him. And I thought that was really cool too. Also the music aspect of it, which is, with people with Alzheimer's or whatever, music is supposed to be very powerful, like bring them
Right.
back to that place.
That's
so it's
right.
important, they've done studies, or even people without Alzheimer's, but like they did a study with older people, I think like in an assisted living or senior living or something like that, where they just pretended that it was the 1940s. So all the staff was trained, all of the decor, all of the technology, all the music was all just
From that era.
from that era.
Yeah.
And the men that were in that study were significantly healthier, lived longer,
Oh, wow.
had so much better outcomes than the ones who were just in a traditional
That's fascinating.
setting. Isn't that
Wow.
fascinating?
It makes total sense, though. Because, as humanity evolves, like, there's technology and, things that are foreign in our brain, or our aging brain, it's hard to catch up, like the youth. Technology is a really good example. So that can be depressing. That could make you just feel like giving up.
Yeah.
This study was done a while back, so that it was the era that those men in that facility were like young men, like in their 20s, I think, to capture so that they felt like they were back in their 20s again.
Wow, that's amazing.
So what's the consensus on the movie? Did we all enjoy it? Some of us took naps.
I
But
took a little nap. Then
Yeah.
I woke up during a commercial, I guess, or something.
I missed that.
But overall,
Yeah, it was good. Totally worth
Yeah,
seeing.
I
It was
enjoyed
it was really good.